Hey, everyone. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Jenelle Riley, as the nice lady told you, and I'm so excited to be here today with the SAG Foundation conversation with one of my favorite actresses, Mary Steenburgen. Since her film debut opposite Jack Nicholson in Going South, this is an actress who consistently turns in fantastic performances in films that are really varied. I mean, everything from Cross Creek to Time After Time to Step Brothers. She is, of course, an Academy Award winner for her work in Melvin and Howard, a SAG Award winner for her work in the Help Ensemble, and an Emmy nominee. Please welcome Mary Steenburgen. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations, you're like the busiest woman on TV right now.
I have a very good team, some of who showed up today, all of whom showed up today.
They are really
so
good. Yeah.
They're very good at their job because, you know, it's one thing to find amazing work for you when you're young, but when you're my age, you know, I sort of expected to be gardening by now, and they're keeping me so busy that sometimes I even complain about how busy I am before I think about it, and then I go, what, are you kidding?
I mean, it seems like looking at your resume, you've always worked, but really like the last couple years, you're like one of the busiest people in the business. Does it feel that way to you, or?
It feels like I'm very busy now. I honestly do credit that I think part of it is that at this moment in time, I'm the best represented I've ever been in my whole career. And I really do. Back here somewhere. Is it UTA and Management 360 and Annette Wolf and Samantha Hill. So. But I feel like I'm very blessed to work with them because they're creative and they're doing their job and they're not phoning anything in. You know, they get excited and they're passionate and they're artists in their own way. So the material that they're drawn to is material I tend to like, and so that's exciting when you're in that collaboration as opposed to it just being a sort of business relationship. And I don't know. The rest of it, I really don't know, other than I think this is the golden age of television and there's so much happening. But it's very unexpected. And there were years I didn't work. And there was time when I felt, you know, the things that all actors go through where you feel like the world has forgotten you exist or you know, that you wonder, should I even be doing this? So I'm really happy to not be feeling that way right now.
Because this is an audience of actors here at SAG Foundation, I usually like to start by asking how you got your SAG card, but I'm wondering if it was from your first movie.
Everything, including my first passport, came from Going South. I'd never been out of the country, and we went to Mexico. I'd never been on a film set. I'd never been a background person or played a small part in a movie. I had studied for 2 years at the Neighborhood Playhouse with Sandy Meisner, which was a blessing, yes. And then got out and picked exactly the wrong agent to represent me. We had a showcase where 9 different agents contacted me. I zeroed in on the one who really had zero interest in me and was exclusively signed for a year. He didn't send me out on one audition in 1 year. So at the end of that year, I joined a comedy improv group with 4 or 5 other members of the Neighborhood Playhouse. And the most important person we knew was somebody that worked for the Bureau of Alcoholism of the city of New York. So we did comedy shows for people who were drying out from booze. And, at first it was really kind of horrifying and even scary sometimes. I mean, we'd climb these back alley stairs in Bedford-Stuyvesant and Harlem and all over the place. And then I began to get really into it because, first of all, I felt, love and compassion for them, and also because when I made them laugh, I thought that was really cool because they weren't feeling like laughing at all. And so it became kind of an amazing place to develop comedic skills. And we did that for several years, and we became the resident company of the Manhattan Theater Club.
Wow.
And so, we were in the cabaret when people would see different shows. We were what they would see in the, and all this time I'm still waitressing because occasionally we get bus fare or something, but that was it. So I worked for many years as a waitress, and my final classiest job was at the Magic Pan, which was a creperie where I wore a little dirndl and little black orthopedic shoes and black tights, and that's where I was working when I auditioned for Jack Nicholson.
Okay, well, first of all, I have to ask, what was the name of the improv group? Because I love improv group names.
Cracked Tokens. And we had good nights and bad nights. I think like most improv groups. I mean, I remember my best and my worst. My worst was we would work from cards that someone would turn in, and then Pamela Moeller, who now runs the Neighborhood Playhouse, would call out, Mary, John, and this was the bad night. I could have had a V8. And I looked at John, and John looked at me, and it's like, I got nothing. And to this day, I got nothing. I don't know what I would have done, but it was just this sad death on stage. It was awful.
So I'm actually surprised to hear you auditioned for Going South, because there's sort of this discovered in the Schwab's drugstore legend about you landing this role. You were spotted in a reception hall. Is that true?
Well, I'll try to tell it fast. So Chris Guest's mother, Jean Guest, was one of the people that saw me in this show at the Manhattan Theater Club, and she saw me do this little monologue I did about a lady from Arkansas who, which is where I'm from, and it was something that, I don't know, she responded to it, and so she started calling people on my behalf and saying, you should see this kid that's, in this comedy improv group. And so she put me, she called Juliet Taylor's office, and Juliet Taylor was out having a baby, so her assistant was meeting people, and I went in for a general casting interview. At the end of the interview, which went very well, I stood up to leave, and this is the part that, depending on what your belief system is, you can interpret it any way you want, but something kind of happened to me where I just said, and I was shy to a fault. Like, I wasn't pushy. My friends were always lecturing me that I should be more pushy and more assertive, and if they started to dismiss me, I was down a half a block away before they could finish. But this day I said, are you waiting are you casting anything in particular? And she said, I'm casting a movie called Going South with Jack Nicholson, but we're supposed to have well-known actresses coming in or very beautiful models, and you don't really fall into either category. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to go out there and just wait and see if maybe you'll give me a script until I can read the script. And she looked at me like, wait, what don't you understand about what I just said? And so I slipped out the door, and somebody else went in to meet with her, the next person. And I sat down in a chair, and there's 3 gorgeous models with scripts, literally looking like you did not take the same public transportation system I took to get here. And so I thought, okay, I'm looking down the floor, and I'm thinking, when that door opens and that girl leaves, the next girl leaves, I'm going to stick my head in, and I'm going to go, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. Please forgive my rudeness, and hope we get to work together, and so sorry. And so I'm looking down, formulating my apology to her, and I see these 2 shoes, and this voice says, are you waiting to see me? And I think, that actually sounds like Jack Nicholson, who she didn't say anything about him being in New York, much less somewhere in the depths of that office. So my first reaction was don't look up, because maybe you can come back tomorrow when you can look better and you're not wearing this T-shirt that somebody left on your table at the restaurant that cost $2.95, you know. And so I kept my head down. He said, "You waiting to see me?" I said, "No." And he goes, "You're not?" And I said, "Nope." And he goes, "Why not?" And I say, "I don't have a script." He walks over, gets a script, hands it to me.
Wow.
And he said, 10 minutes tomorrow. So I stayed up all night. I lived in a 5th floor walkout with a window our landlord wouldn't repair when it was broken. And so it had plywood over it to try to, I mean, it was the saddest apartment. Anyway, I stayed up all night, worked on everything the way Sandy would have told me to work on it. And then I went in the next day, kind of dressed in what I thought was sort of like 1800s, vaguely. I probably looked ridiculous. And I went in and I started reading, and then I finished a couple of scenes, and he goes, "Okay, well, read this." And I read that, and then his pizza came, and I stood up to leave, and he goes, "Sit down, eat the pizza, keep reading, keep reading." And at one point, the lady who had told me I wasn't right for it kind of put her head in there, and I think she thought, you know, something was going on, but it was like we were literally reading every scene in the movie twice.
Wow.
And then at the end of it, he goes, "So, where have you been?" I said, "Well, I've been here for 6 years." And he said, "And you've done," I said, "Well, not anything you ever would have seen, you know." And he said, "Well, you understand that I want to direct this." And I went, "Yes." And then I asked people, "I don't know what that, didn't understand. What does that mean?" And they said, "That means he can't cast you because he needs a big star, you know." And I'm like, who knew the Hollywood doublespeak all those years ago in New York? So anyway, to shorten it a little bit, a few days later, I get a call at the Magic Pan that I'm flying to Hollywood for a screen test. I borrowed $1,000 for some friends of mine, bought some clothes. They said they would put me up for one night at the Chateau Marmont. We did 3 scenes, full costume, makeup at the Paramount. It was 6 actresses, all who were huge stars and had all made movies, and me. And then, so at the end of those days, my money had run out, and I had to get back into Manhattan for my waitressing shift on Friday night. I had cut it so close, I literally didn't have enough money to get by bus from the airport into the Magic Pan. So I went in to Paramount. I said, "Could you, it was a great experience, thank you so much." Because everybody said, "You're not going to get this." And I said, "It was a great experience, thank you so much. Could you pay me the one night's hotel bill in cash, if you don't mind, instead of sending it to me?" And Jack's smoking a big cigar, and he goes, "Sit down, kid, don't worry about it. You're on the payroll."
Wow.
And that was it.
It's amazing.
Now, a weird little addendum to that is that does involve Schwab's Drugstore, is that it's long enough ago that Schwab's Drugstore, which of course was the famous place where Lana Turner was discovered, was actually still there, right next to the Chateau Marmont. So that's where I would go to eat breakfast. And the first time I ever saw my own photograph in a newspaper or something, I'm sitting at the Schwab's Drugstore, and I look over, and there's my face, and the thing says, "Remember when stars were discovered in drugstores?"
No way.
Isn't that weird? And that's the first, you know, I wasn't discovered in a drugstore, but I guess my publicity was anyway.
Well, it is that great quote-unquote overnight success that you'd spent 6 years working for.
I know. I always make sure, because I speak at schools quite a bit. I just spoke at the Neighborhood Playhouse last week, actually, and I do always make sure that I talk about not just the discovery story, but the years before it, because it doesn't usually happen overnight.
I actually want to go back to the beginning, because you mentioned that you were born and raised in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. You're, about as far away from the industry as people can get. Mm-hmm. When did you know you wanted to be an actor? I think it was related to books. I was a big reader. I had some
there was some sadness, you know, in our house growing up, and it was also wonderful. I had incredible parents, but my dad was ill quite a bit, and my way of escaping things that made me sad was to read. And my sister always said, well, you don't have to read the book if you watch Mary read the book, because I guess I would emote quite a bit when I would read. And so I never was out of a book. And, you know, Dickens and all the kind of, I loved anything to do with England and Wuthering Heights and all those things. And so this is where I go off on a track and then I forget what the original question was. I do this all the time.
When you knew you wanted to be an actor.
Oh, yeah. So I think it was born in the reading. And then I remember when I was 16 and I had a friend that it was a girl that played bass, and her friend was a singer, and they were talking about all the stuff they do. And I thought, well, I want something. And then I thought, well, I guess maybe I could act. And you have to know that this was Arkansas, but it was Arkansas, you know, in the 60s when there hadn't ever been a movie shot local. There was not any connection to it. So how I sort of made that leap, but I just sort of realized it was like reading on its feet. You know, it's like all that imaginary world, and I could just stand there and live in it, you know, which is all I really wanted to do anyway. And somehow I understood that that's what I could do. And then when I only went to 1 year of college, but I was in the play, you know, the sort of main play, and that really confirmed for me that I loved it.
Was that your first time on stage?
No, my first time on stage was the senior play at high school, which was Our Town, of course.
Of course.
I did Emily.
And what was the college play, do you remember?
Yes, it was called The Night Thoreau Spent in Jail by Lawrence and Lee. Yeah.
Okay.
I played Lydia Emerson.
And then is it true your one of your professors actually encouraged you to leave?
Yeah, he, you know, he said, you really don't belong here. You should go to New York where they know what to do with you. And he gave me this list of schools, which I still have. And he said, these are all really good schools, but there's one that's extraordinary because of this one person that's there. And somehow he knew about Sandy Meisner, you know, and there's a check by that one school where I checked it, and that's the only one I applied to. So I really didn't have a backup plan if I didn't get in the Playhouse, but I did.
Did you get in before you moved to New York, or did you have to move there?
Yes, no, I flew to Dallas, and my second flight of my life, I flew to Dallas and met with a man that was a regional rep for the school, and just talked to him about my feelings about acting. And then we waited and waited and waited, and my mother called me one day and she said, there's an envelope here from the neighborhood Playhouse. And I said, is it fat or is it thin? And she said, it's really fat. I said, good. So she opened it and we just screamed and cried. And, you know, they were amazing people, because my dad was a freight train conductor and my mom was a secretary. And it was terrifying to have your daughter go off to this huge city where we didn't know a single soul, and to do this thing that was so far from our experience. You know, it wasn't as if we knew actors. They weren't even real to us. And they were so brave. And they would say to people years later, when people would say to my dad, you should tell Mary she should come back home. You know, she can be a teacher or something. My dad go, oh no, she's gonna make it. You'll see. You know, and he was actually proud of me when I was a waitress in New York. He just thought that was cool that I was brave enough to go do that. You know, so that was, you know, that was pretty cool to swim in that kind of love. You know,
I was going to say that's not the story you traditionally hear.
No, and I really tried with my kids to, you know, not make them feel like there's limits on any dream, you know, because I was never given that.
I actually have a question from the audience from Wednesday, down in the front. wants to know what it was like to be taught by Mr. Meisner himself, and if you have any good stories about him.
Well, we were the last class to study with Sandy before he had his larynx removed. So so kids that studied with him after that heard him speak, you know, and of course he was a terrible smoker. I mean, he just, and I mean, we all may be getting something just due to the secondhand smoke in the room, because all these teachers sat there and smoked. And I was just there the other day in this same room that used to be filled with smoke, and it's the same chairs and the same rickety old bed that people do improv stuff. And, you know, the only difference is maybe that Sandy's not there and there's no smoke. But he was incredible. He was scary. He was wonderful. He taught me what a teacher is. I wanted, like everybody, I wanted his approval desperately, and he took us through his method. And, you know, some of what acting is alchemy, and it's what your life, it's what's inside of you, or the life that you're leading, or the way your mind works. But some of it can be helped by teaching, some of it. And to the degree that it could be helped by teaching, I had an incredible teacher. And I love his method. I think it also depends on who you're studying it with. But there's a great book by Bill Esper about, I think I wrote a little blurb in it, but it's about I actually think it's better than Sandy's own book about his method. I think Bill was sitting right there for many, many years. And so, yeah, I do remember one like little thing I could tell you is just that he, you know, we revered him and we're terrified of him. And so I remember doing some scene from some play, and there was a moment of total indecision. And I was having trouble getting to that place. And so at the end of it, you know, he like puts his cigarette down and he stands up. And of course I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And he walks over to me and he goes, "Get on your knees." And I'm like, you know, so I quickly got down on my knees, and then he put his hands on my head and he goes, "Now get up." And so I kind of went like, and he was pressing down. So I went like that, and he goes, screamed, "Get up!" like that. So I really tried, and then, you know, ensued this like incredible battle of trying to get up with his hands pressing down on my head. And finally, after a few minutes of it, he goes, "That's the feeling." And it was like, okay, I got it. Wow. I got it now. Can't move either way, you know? And so it was, he was just such a visceral, clear teacher that if you were willing to do the work and be brave, you were going to learn something in that place.
Do you, to this day, I mean, ever work with an acting coach or a teacher, or go back and if there's, you know, a particular role you're struggling with?
I did. You know, I've done that a little bit with Bill Esper, and I've done that not so much, because honestly, what I do is I'll go back and look at Bill's book about Sandy, or that was the other thing. He repeated things so that I hear them in my sleep. I mean, I hear his voice. So what I really try to do is just remember to go back and do what he taught me to do. And when I'm struggling, it's usually because I'm not doing that, you know. And a huge part of what he is talking about, and I'm sure you're all familiar with his work, but a huge part of it is that you've got all your attention on that other person, you know, and it's so hard as an actor to do that, because we're all so self-conscious. We probably wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we're not a little screwed up in there somewhere. And, you know, it's so hard to take the attention off yourself, but when you do that and you fully put your attention, not looking at them, not just listening to them, but you're like, you're not going to miss a blink of their eye or little curl of their mouth or any little thing. When you're really putting your attention on the other person, magical things happen. And that stuff that you sat around thinking how brilliant it was going to be, you know, the night before or on the way to work, that flies out the window, because they're making you do what you do, you know. You didn't plan that nod and that, you know, or that laugh, you know. I made you do that, and that's when that's alive, and that's the life of acting. And you know, the seed to the craft of acting is the reality of doing, and the other part to that is really doing. What are you doing? Well, really do that, you know. If you're working with props or you're doing something with props, it's not, you know, really do what you're doing, you know. And I love that. When I go back to that, I find my work is much better. Do I hit it 100% of the time? No.
And during this time, these 6 years you're in New York and sort of struggling or working day jobs, I should say, what sort of career did you envision for yourself? Did you just think you'd do theater, or did you always want to do film, TV?
I don't think I even conceived of film and TV. I wasn't well versed at all in film, to put it mildly. The only theater I'd seen was in the 6 years that I'd been there. I tried to see everything I could. You know, you could, at Times Square, you could get the free tickets and do standing room only, and, you know, so I did a lot of that. But, and TV was just so different then, and there wasn't, I don't know, that all felt so far away from me. But theater is what I thought I would be doing. And I remember an actual moment where I looked in the mirror at one point, and this is in my 6th year of waitressing, and I remember looking in the mirror, and I had this stupid little outfit on that was supposed to look like a French country crepe maker. And I remember looking in the mirror and saying, this could be your life. You might be doing this forever, waitressing and acting, but acting for no money for the rest of your life. Is that okay with you? And I realized it was okay with me, because I loved it so much and I appreciated it so much, and I was having such a good time when it wasn't, I could have had a VA, when most of the time I was having such a good time that I was willing, you know. Now, one wonders, and I've wondered, how long would I have lasted never making a living at acting and always being a waitress? I don't know, you know, but I'd like to think I'd still be like carrying I still practice carrying my plates just in case. I just played a waitress in one of the millions of movies my teams have gotten for me this year. But I just played a waitress, and I said, do you guys haven't had me like carry plates to the table yet? And they go, oh, do you want to do that in this shot? And I said, yeah. And I stacked them up, and they're like, holy cow! And I went, yeah, I still keep it up, you know. Thanksgiving dinner, that's how I serve it.
There's that sense memory. Yeah. I sort of asked you about this earlier, but we have an audience question from Beth. Wants to know if you ever considered anything other than acting as a sole career. Was there ever going to be a Mary the veterinarian or a Dr. Mary?
Well, I love kids, so they're teaching, and my sister's a teacher, my aunt was a teacher, my mother taught for a little while. So if there had been anything, it probably would have been teaching, acting, you know. But I would say that there wasn't when I was younger, but I'm very deeply involved in music, so it would have to be something connected to music.
Can you play an instrument?
Well, I started, this is where it gets weird. I started my first instrument Valentine's Day 3 years ago, which was an accordion.
Really?
And,
that's a tough one.
I know, and I'm obsessed with it. If you hunt deep enough in the internet, you'll find me playing an accordion. And or if you watched Last Man on Earth, I play in Last Man on Earth. That really is me playing. And I had taken piano lessons as a child, and it really didn't work out that well or take. And so then I waited, what is that, like 45 or 50 years or something. I'm so bad at math. And then I take up the accordion. And yesterday, funny that you ask, I got a ukulele. And I just set up a lesson for Sunday, but I did spend most of last night teaching myself how to play like Ode to Joy and Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I'm a big believer in saying yes, and this whole thing about I don't do that, or I can't do that, or I don't have a musical bone in my body, I don't have an artistic bone in my body, and it's like, you won't. Yeah, you won't. You will never do that. But if you actually try and practice and like make the effort, you'd be surprised what you can do. I mean, I just think it's sad that people have a cutoff date for growth and dreams. And, we tell our kids when they say, oh, I can't do it, you go, of course you can. You give them this lecture. And then what is that like shelf date that's no longer true for a human being? So I guess I'm like, I don't know. I'm a diehard believer in the ability of the human mind to keep growing.
I just think the accordion has got to be the hardest instrument out there. Like,
and
why
yet
that one?
I seem to be able to play it. I don't know why. I just think there's some past life thing there or something. I mean, if people could see me, alone in my house, my 2 dogs who are so over it, playing my accordion. That's pretty much a normal night for me, and I'm not kidding.
So back to your big break going south. I mean, you mentioned this was your first time in front of a camera, your first time traveling overseas, and you're being directed by Jack Nicholson.
It was over the border.
Mexico.
Yeah.
So what's it like, and you're the female lead
Yeah.
in this movie,
Yeah.
but so what's it like not only all that pressure, but you're being directed by Jack Nicholson and starring opposite him?
My first day's work, my first shot, I had to drive a buckboard, pull by a horse, up to like the equivalent of about 2 or 3 city blocks, up to a kind of big rock and make sure the horse's nose is even with the rock. Tie up the buckboard, get out, pull out a bag and a pick and a pen and some ink, dip the pen in the ink, roll out a piece of paper, get him to sign it, blow on it, roll it back up, and then exit the shot. That was my first shot ever in film. And so at the end of it, he calls me Chair, which is a nickname from the movie. So at the end of it, he goes, Chair? And I go, yes. And he goes, it's the hardest shot you're ever gonna do in your whole friggin' career. So
really,
he didn't say friggin'.
Yeah,
but and he said, so he made it go first.
Yeah.
He said, you'll never have to do anything harder than that, and I never have. I mean, in terms of props, and that was the hardest thing. He taught me. I left out that he, in the 2 months before we shot Going South in Mexico, they had me come out and stay at the Chateau Marmont, and my job every day was to drive to Paramount, go sit in a screening room, and he screened movies for me that he thought I should be aware of. So I saw these wonderful Jean Arthur comedies and Judy Holliday and It Should Happen to You and a million different wonderful comedies from the 30s, from the 40s and 50s, and Pat and Mike, and he would then come in at the end of it and say, now, what did she do in that movie that was interesting? Or he would talk about the way she used the camera, or talk about the way she related to the other actor, or just talk about the lightness of it or the tone of it. I didn't know there was such a thing as tone in movies. I hadn't seen any of these films.
Really?
Never, no. It just wasn't a part of my culture growing up. I mean, I saw, I just saw whatever was at the little local cinema, which was not kind of these wonderful classic films.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I mean, I have to, first of all, did you call the Magic Pan and tell him you weren't coming back?
Yes. I called them and told them what they could do with their crafts. They retired my locker. They were my boss actually there is someone, Don and Mary Fitzgerald, they're still friends of mine, and there were so many actors at that place. Yeah. We were all actors, and people were very thrilled for me and jealous of me, but it was both. It was inspirational, and it was, I'm sure it was like Mary Steenburgen, but yeah, it was I have to say my first year out here was very confusing because I didn't belong to the movie star set. I didn't, and yet everybody I knew was a movie star. Mm-hmm. Like literally the only people I knew in LA were Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson, and their friends and stuff. And I didn't fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in at all. And I have a whole other little social anxiety challenge that meant most of the time I was in my apartment, and so it was hard because I also didn't fit in with the like struggling actors who were like, we don't really want to hear your story, So it was kind of like I went to therapy for the first time. Actually, I had almost run out of money, and I remember finding this girl through social services that was she's doing what my son-in-law is doing now, which is seeing patients while writing her thesis. And that was I learned a lot about myself by doing that. And it sort of helped with the loneliness. But it was hard to figure out where I fit, mm-hmm. In those days. And then my second movie was Time After Time, and I met Malcolm McDowell, and Malcolm had such a similar story to mine, except that it was Lindsay Anderson instead of Jack Nicholson, but he'd gone through it 10 years earlier when he made If with Lindsay Anderson. And I think a lot of what I fell in love with in him and falling in love with him, and I married him and have 2 children with him, and I still consider him a real friend and love him. And but a lot of it was just this commonality of coming and working so hard from this place and then not knowing quite where you belong. We both went through that.
Time After Time is such a great movie.
It's good, isn't it? I just ran into Nicholas Meyer in the dog park.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, especially like if you hear the premise, it's like H.G. Wells travels to the future, our present, to find Jack the Ripper. Like, you don't expect it to be so smart and clever and really romantic.
Really, yeah.
Did that come about as a direct result of going south? Did you have all sorts of offers coming your way, or?
I did. You know what? I mean, I was offered a lot of TV, and I'm so happy to say that times have changed. In those days, for someone like me who started in a movie as a lead in a movie, the worst thing I could have ever done would be to do a TV series. And that snobbery and that kind of delineation of like where you belong, everything has nicely become a lot more democratic, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of that still exists, but I don't think, because I was told, I was better off getting all my money from from Social Security, not Social Security, what do you call it?
Unemployment?
Unemployment. Couldn't think of that word. Unemployment checks, than to dare do a TV series.
Wow.
Literally, people said that. And so finally I was offered, I think I was offered a couple of movies during that time, but they weren't great. And then I was offered Time After. No, it wasn't. I had to audition for Time After Time. I auditioned and I got that part. And I was really scared because Jack wasn't there, and he was everything to me. He was my mentor, and while we didn't have a romantic relationship, we had this like powerful, like mentor, discovery relationship, and he wasn't there, so that was huge. And then I met, and then Malcolm and I fell in love on that, and 2 children later.
Do you still see Jack Nicholson? Do you send him flowers every week?
He knows I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
When I won my Oscar for Melvin and Howard, which was my third film, I spent most of my speech talking about Jack, who had nothing to do with Melvin and Howard, but just because I was so grateful.
I love there was a gasp when you said that was just your third film.
Yeah, I know.
But Melvin and Howard, another great director, Jonathan Demme, playing Linda, the wife of Melvin Dumas, the man who claimed that Howard Hughes left him his fortune.
Left him a 17th of his fortune.
Oh, which was like $200 million.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that is that I saw that will, so we shot with that will, and just to say for Melvin's sake, that if Melvin was lying, he was a forger that even handwriting experts could not disprove. He would have had to have written the will in a type of ballpoint pen that Howard Hughes had bought up that had been discontinued, and somehow known that, gotten a hold. This is all pre-internet days, and he would have had to have written out this long list of Howard Hughes' obscure relatives, and then down sort of 17 or something it says, and Melvin Dumas of Gabbs, Nevada, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
So I believed it. I believed his story because, and I just don't think that the people around, the corporations around Howard Hughes had any intention of Melvin Dumas or anybody else on that will getting any of that money.
Really?
But I believe that we saw the real will. I do. I still do.
And did you get to meet with Linda?
No, Linda and I talked on the phone, and I had this instinct that it was just better that I kind of do my thing, and because I wasn't doing an historical figure, I had to bring to life what Bo Goldman wrote, and I have never seen a more beautiful screenplay, and it's still probably the most beautiful screenplay I ever saw, and it won Best Screenplay,
Yes.
and it was stunning because it had things like, it gave me things to say, like he comes in the strip club where, I'm dancing, and he goes, "You got to get out of here, come on, you got to get out of here." And I go, "I can't." And he goes, "Why not?" And I say, "I love to dance." You go, and you read that and you go, there's nothing I don't know about her.
Yeah.
And that's why, in a weird way, I didn't want the kind of solid thing of talking to somebody, unless you're playing someone who you need to impersonate. But I felt like I wanted Bo's Linda to be up there. So.
By the way, I just saw a quiz the other day where you were rated one of the best strippers on film.
Oh, good.
It was like you and Natalie Portman at the top of the list. So congratulations.
Wow.
So, so the Oscar is nice, but really, that's pretty cool.
Get down to what really matters.
But you mentioned, you have played real historical figures before. I know you were Hannah Nixon.
Right.
I don't know how often you play real people, but is there a different approach, or does it feel like an added responsibility?
Well, I did talk at length to people about her, and it was interesting. I had a really interesting conversation with John Dean about her, who remembered her and remembered her well. So that was fascinating. It's one of those things where Sandy used to say, you can do all the research in the world, but if it doesn't result in behavior, it doesn't mean anything. So crowding your head with facts is, if it does something to you, I suppose it's worth it. But the main thing is to find things that you understand about that person on an emotional level. So, in an ideal world, you do it all. So, but it'll do you no good if it doesn't connect to you. The weird little, I always picture myself like, those in old Chinese apothecary shops, like those cabinets with all these drawers, and you have to take a little of this of that drawer and a little of this of that drawer, and they're all parts of you, but it's the alchemy that you mix for each character is all parts of you, and if you don't understand which doors to open from your research, it hasn't really done anything for you.
So this is only your third movie. You win the Academy Award. Do you remember much about that experience?
By the way, I won a Golden Globe too,
Yes.
and which I and a bunch of lovely critics awards, and I say that always because the Oscars eclipse so much. But it was, I remember that. Oh my gosh, do I tell the story or not? So I just had my baby Lily, and she was 3 months old, or not even quite that, and I'd never left her at all. And so the studio that released Melvin and Howard had not believed in the movie. Let's put it that way. It was never released in Europe ever.
Really?
No, and they didn't understand how to sell it, and there was no ad campaign for me. There was nothing. There was no makeup artist or limo or nobody. I went and got a dress off the rack, and I had this antique velvet coat that I'd got at the Antiquarius Market in London. And anyway, Malcolm and I go to the Oscars, and I was a nursing mother, and let's just say that at the end of the evening when we all had to go on stage, it was good that I had that coat on because because my dress was pretty much soaked. And I went to the party afterwards. I just remember going to the party for like 2 minutes and seeing Michael Jackson dancing with Brooke Shields, and then I just thought, well, I have to go home, I was like, and it was so kind of hilariously my life. It was like so perfect for my life because I've hung out at the White House, and there's always something like that for me. There's always something that just reminds me, you're just from Arkansas, and don't you ever get any like swelled head about what's going on in your life. But there's like some angel that just amuses themselves by doing these things to me. So that was the most glamorous moment of my life.
And at this point, were you still with the original kind of shifty agent you mentioned, or had you found new representation?
No, I had a wonderful agent, Martha Luttrell, at that point. My first agent, he wasn't shifty. He was lovely, but he did. I'm not sure he wasn't connected. A little. I'm not sure. The jury's out on that. Yeah.
I mean, did the Oscars sort of change your career? Because I know, like, 2 of the next movies you did were with Milos Forman and Woody Allen, and I don't know how much of that had to do with, a lot of people think you win the Oscar, you work for the rest of your life, but, we've had people say that's not true.
No, I actually didn't work for, I think I did Ragtime before I won the Oscar because I was pregnant with Lily when I did Ragtime. Like, there's a couple of shots where you can sort of see Mother in Ragtime has quite a large belly. And then it was a little while before I did the movie with Woody because I just loved being with her and not working. And I struggled a little bit in LA. LA is a town that I've finally discovered you build your own LA. New York is gonna be New York. It doesn't matter what you do. New York is New York, but you construct your own Los Angeles. And depending on where you live and who you hang out with and what you do, and I hadn't figured out LA yet. So we moved to up to Ojai, California, where I've spent actually, if I add up my life, that's where I've spent most of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
What made you, what drew you to Ojai?
We had some friends that moved up there, and I have a dear friend named Guy Webster. He and his wife, Leon, are really good friends, and Guy was the one who took all the album covers of the 60s and 70s, Mamas, Papas, Doors, the Rolling Stones, Beach Boys, and he was the first person Jack sent me to be photographed, and we've been friends since 1977, and they moved up there. So I I just found it to be a place that I related to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mentioned Milos Forman and Woody Allen and obviously Jonathan Demme, and these are just the people you started out with, but you've worked with so many amazing directors. I mean, what do you think makes a good director? What do you hope for when you show up to set?
Well, I think what everybody thinks is that they constantly like tell you all this interesting stuff to do, and I think the biggest thing a director does has to do with casting, and then I think the other thing is that they create a world that is safe and amazing and inspirational for you to play in, and they put a safety net there that makes you feel like you can fly. If that's not there, you're always like there's some little part of you that's protecting yourself, you know? And somebody like Jonathan Demme, it's not that he says anything so special to you. It's like on the day that you're shooting the wedding scene, when everybody's kind of tired and it's toward the end of the movie, he shows up in a tuxedo with a red carnation. And that was all I needed to know. I was getting married that day, you know, and he like, you know, changed that day for me. And I think I've just been blessed. I mean, I worked with so many different beautiful directors, Lasse Hallström and, you know, Woody and Ron Howard, who's incredible, and a lot of the young directors that I've been working with, and you know, are also, you know, and then there's Adam McKay, who directed Step Brothers, who truly is inspirational, because literally half of it's improvised, and he's screaming stuff at you to say from off camera, and then ruining takes for laughing, and there's so much freedom and excitement in working with him that you know, you just have, honestly, it's like you feel like you should give them a refund for, you know, so much fun.
Did you call on your old improv skills from
yes.
back in the day?
But here I was with, you know, comedic geniuses and Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, and so it was a few days of just like feeling like I'm not going to open my mouth, and really my job was to make it believable. I have a son, Will Ferrell, that's sitting in the back seat when I'm driving a car. You know, I mean, if I can make that real, I didn't have to be funny. I just had to do that.
Well, I should also mention, I mean, in addition to working with great directors, you gave birth to one. Your son.
Did.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Charlie McDowell.
Thank you.
If you guys haven't seen it, he directed a fantastic movie called The One I Love. And you mentioned earlier about, you know, not wanting to put limitations on your kids, but how did you feel when you realized he wanted to get into the business?
Well, his whole childhood, we kept saying, oh my God, Charlie, you're so going to be an actor, because he's crazily hilarious. Like, yesterday I was on the phone with him crying, laughing at an imitation he was doing of someone. And he's really funny, and he's really, really handsome. And he has zero interest in acting. Really? I mean, zero. And he just always wanted to be a director, and he went to Chapman for 2 years, and then he went to AFI, and he was the youngest person to ever graduate from AFI, at least at that time. And he's a really hard worker, and everything he's getting, it has nothing to do with me, because I mean, other than raising him, because I don't even know the people that he works with half the time, but I'm really proud of him. He's just finding his own way and working really hard.
Well, he did cast Ted Danson in his movie. So
he did,
you know,
he did, but he has like one tiny little scene. So his leads are Mark Duplass and Elizabeth Moss. So.
Yeah, I guess it is only one scene. For some reason, I thought it was a lot bigger of a part.
No.
See, there are no small parts. You mentioned how, you know, television was viewed differently at that time, but I know in 1985 you did the F. Scott Fitzgerald adaptation, Tender as the Night.
Yeah, that was amazing to work on. Yeah.
What I mean, this is so ambitious. I mean, first of all, it's television, which, like you said, back then was viewed differently, but it's also like an adaptation of a beloved novel.
Yeah.
Was there any hesitancy in signing on to that?
No. It was a great part. It was, you know, Nicole Diver, who's Fitzgerald's tragic heroine in Tender as the Night, and the BBC produced it with Showtime, and it was a 6-hour miniseries. But I'll tell you the coolest thing about, I loved it. We shot in Europe. It was hard as a mother because they were with me and they were little and we were always moving, and you learn which countries are baby friendly and which ones aren't. And Switzerland may be boring, but they're very baby friendly, and when they say they're going to get milk and whatever up to your room, it comes. France, it's like, maybe yes, maybe no. And I love France, but it was hard when they were little. And but the coolest thing about that is that it aired, it was mostly seen in Europe. And a couple of years later, I was waiting to be interviewed, I think somewhere in New York at CBS or someplace, and my mother was with me, and they said, well, it'll be just a few more minutes. We're taping an interview with Miss Audrey Hepburn. And I was like, is there any way that my mother and I could meet her? And this very officious lady said, well, I'll see, I'll check. She's very busy, and I'll check. And so we're just standing there, and then all of a sudden, you can see like this glow coming down the hall. And it's her, and literally I felt my heart just like in my throat. And by the way, I'm like 10 feet taller than her, but she was like this wisp, and she's coming toward us, and the person goes, Miss Hepburn, there's a young actress, and she goes, or who'd like to meet you, her name is, and she said, I know her name. And she comes up to me and she takes my hands and she looks up at me and she said, may I kiss you? And I said, yes. And she gives me 3 kisses, one, and then she said, I've seen Tender as the Night 3 times in 3 different languages. And I said, oh my gosh, that's like, 18 hours of television. And she said, can I sit down and talk to you about it? And we just sat there, and I got to introduce her to my mother, and my mother was a part of this, and it was really one of the biggest thrills of my life, and so whenever I think about it, it made me a little sad that it wasn't more widely seen here, but like, look what I got out of it.
I mentioned just before we came on, you did a movie shortly thereafter, Dead of Winter, which is it's a thriller, it's a horror, it's a great genre film. You play 3 roles in this movie, and sometimes you're playing one of the roles pretending to be one of the other roles.
Well, sometimes also one of me kills the other of me.
That's right. Spoiler alert, but you should still see it.
And I kill my friend Roddy McDowell, who's one of my dearest friends, and he puts his hand, I probably shouldn't spoil it, but he puts his hand up, and I stab him through his hand into his neck with an ice pick, and we were pathetic. We could not stop giggling, and it was like, and I kept saying, it's really not right that you're making me laugh, when I'm supposed to be killing you. No one's going to believe this, but oh my God. He was one of the great loves of my life, by the way. He was such a dear friend, very special person.
Was that a difficult movie to make? I mean, just keeping track, shooting out of sequence.
It was freezing.
Yeah,
I had so many scenes climbing up snowbanks like all night long in Toronto with wind machines blowing on me. It was so cold. I remember that, and it was Arthur Penn directed it, and it's kind of it's like a funny good B movie. I mean, it's definitely hilariously 80s fashion. I have like major big hair like wigs on, and it was crazy, but it was challenging. I was proud. I remember the New York Times saying something. This is probably one of the last reviews I ever read, because I've now for years haven't, but I remember they said something about that even though she plays 3 different characters, you always know who she is, which I thought was cool, because that was my goal, but I don't know, I haven't seen it for a long time.
I mean, what has been the most difficult role you've had to play?
I guess I can't think like that. I mean, they're all, they all don't boil down to mosts or bests or favorites or anything, because they're all so integrated with my life, you know. So they're my children are in the, you know, birthday party scene in Parenthood, or, you know, my children were standing there when I'm hanging upside down from a train in Back to the Future 3, or, you know, it's like, so for me, they're like these lavish home movies that I remember, you know, you guys watch them as a movie, and I watch them as my life. And remembering, oh, you know, that guy that's so lovely, you know, that I worked with, and, you know, Miss Firecracker is no longer with us, and what a wonderful, you know, actor. It's always for me this kind of much more emotional experience rather than how is it as a movie. I mean, some of them are, I think, would hold up as great movies, and some of them are terrible movies, and I'm sort of in love with all of them because they were part of my life.
You mentioned Parenthood and Back to the Future 3, and I would also throw in What's Eating Gilbert, Grape. And all three of those movies, you have these great leading men, and this, you know, Steve Martin, Christopher Lloyd, Johnny Depp, and you have such great chemistry with them, which is something that actually seems to be recurring in a lot of your roles. I mean, what is the secret to that great chemistry, or is it instantaneous often, or do you really have to work at it?
Well, I think I've been pretty lucky because those are all lovely men, and it was, you know, incredible to work with each one of them, especially those three you just named. They're all extraordinary in their own way. And, you know, I think it's something you hope for, and I think often it's, if the script is good and everybody's doing their work, you're kind of in a situation where it's likely to go well because you're there with a common purpose. And part of the magic of what we do for a living is that there are very few things anymore that are not solitary. Everybody's sitting in front of their computer or their phone, or you know, and even, you know, or in their cubicle. And, you know, making a movie or doing a play or doing a TV show, it's like raising the tent at the circus. You need everybody pulling on it, you know, and so guys like that, it's like they're part of my team, and there'd be something wrong if I didn't have chemistry with them, you know.
What about, because I mentioned Dead of Winter, which is, you know, a very different genre from what you usually do. Do you have a favorite genre? You do comedy and drama, and then, you know, throw in horror. Do you have a personal favorite?
I really love comedy because, I mean, it's fantastic to have great, meaty, dramatic roles. But for me, as a human being, I am a laugh junkie. I married a funny man. I gave birth to funny people. I have funny friends. I like to laugh, you know. And so something like Last Man on Earth feels like, you know, a privilege to go to the set every day. I mean, I literally was watching the other night, and the camera's on over my shoulder onto Will Forte, and my shoulder is going like that. It's like, how in the world, you know? Yeah. But as Adam McKay said to me when I said, Adam, why did you keep that shot where you can full on see I'm laughing? He said, we don't have one where you're not. So.
Now, I'm curious because in addition to Last Man on Earth, you've got Justified, which is a very different character.
That was a great character, yes. And that was a drama. But when they called me about it, I said to Graham Yost, why did you think of me for this part? You know, she's just this murderous monster. Yeah. That's putting it mildly. And he said, because we knew you could handle the comedy, because it's Elmore Leonard, and it's this darkly comic thing. But if you play the comedy, it kills it. It's just like you have to understand it somewhere inside, you know? And I was so honored he said that, and I really wanted to do what he wanted, you know, and to prove him right. So I loved that character. I was really sad when she violently met her end. The most violent thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Were you a fan of Justified before they came calling?
No, but I quickly became one, because a friend of mine, Dave Hackle, who created Becker, lives up in Ojai, and Dave had always said to me, "You have got to watch Justified. It's like an acting class, like the best acting and best writing. You've got to watch it." And he just loved it. And so when they called me, I called him, and he goes, "Okay, well, start season 1, start with the pilot, and then, you know, by like 10 minutes in the pilot, I'm hooked," and had to do that thing where you watch TV like way too much, and binge watch.
How closely did you work on Justified and Last Man on Earth, because there's such wildly different tones?
Well, so last year, so this is my Jacob Fenton back there, who at UTA, and Lainey Sorkin-Becky and Eric Kranzler. They just had this year where they kept throwing stuff at me, and I said, I can only do this stuff if you guys can actually schedule this. Mm-hmm. So I did. We did some Togetherness episodes, then went into Orange is the New Black, and while I was doing Orange is the New Black, I started Justified, and while I was doing Justified, I started Last Man on Earth. So it's really them, because I just memorized the lines and went to the right. And I remember one day driving, because both Justified and Last Man on Earth, you had to go, you know, to either, you went north on the 405, mm-hmm. But Last Man on Earth, you have to take the Ronald Reagan freeway. I sound like that thing. I sound like that thing the Californians.
Yes, totally.
You know,
take the 118.
And you take the Ronald Reagan. But anyway, so I remember one morning going, crap, wait, which show am I doing today? You know, and it was kind of schizophrenic. But the good thing is, none of those people had anything in common. Like, mm-hmm. I didn't, because I remember doing, I did Philadelphia and What's Eating Gilbert Grape at the same time too.
Oh, really?
And I flew back and forth, and it's like, people said, well, how are you doing this? And I said, there's no overlap other than, you know, me mm-hmm. playing both of them, but they don't, and that's helpful. If the parts had been similar, it would have been strange, you know.
I just remember when you did Philadelphia, which reteamed you with Jonathan Demme mm-hmm. all those years later. Siskel and Ebert, I'm not sure which one, but one of them was saying that it was so brilliant to cast you as the attorney who has to sort of take down Tom Hanks mm-hmm. because you're the most likable person on screen to play a character who is inherently unsympathetic.
Yeah. Serpentine.
Yes.
Somebody said. Yeah. And then she has a moment where she whispers, which some people catch and some people don't. I hate this case, mm-hmm. you know. But in her case, that was an interesting challenge emotionally, because I lost one of my best friends, and my roommate in that apartment, that 5th floor walk-up apartment, was this wonderful young actor named Peter Barkey, who was in the comedy improv group with me, and Peter died. I mean, I went up to see him in Stockton, and within a day or two, I was on that plane to go do Philadelphia, and to play someone who was, supporting these guys who were mm-hmm. firing someone for having AIDS. And as I got on the plane, I looked at the seat I was going to be sitting in, and I see this guy with a bandana and gaunt and frail. Those of us who remember those days remember how often we saw this, and I thought, oh my gosh, Peter just passed away. I'm going to play this part. I'm sitting next to someone who has AIDS, and he looks up, and it's Tom Hanks.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Who I knew, you know, but it was like the transformation was so extraordinary.
Wow.
And my first day's work on that was unusable, because I lost it. I had so much trouble, and I was just so haunted by Peter. And then it dawned on me that I wasn't playing a comment on how I felt about AIDS. I was playing a comment. My role was to uphold the justice system, that every single person in the world, whether you like him or don't like him, whether you agree or don't agree, they are entitled to fair and legal representation. And so when I thought about that, I thought, okay, I can play this part. And so by the second day, I was fine. But honestly, the first day, Jonathan didn't put in the movie. I don't know if it was because of me, but I felt it was, because I was just, I was so struggling emotionally with it.
Wow. So you didn't use anything from that first day with you?
I don't think so.
Back to your current work, tell us everything you can about Orange is the New Black and your character.
And scene.
So, but that hits in June, I believe?
I think so. That's what I can tell you. I think that happens in June.
Was that a show that you had been watching?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. Glued. Huge fan.
Yeah, that is an amazing show. And just going back and forth from all of them, I'm just wondering if you ever showed up with your accordion to the set of Justified.
I took it because I sit around in my trailer playing it, and occasionally someone like looks around to see but they didn't write it in the script. Unlike Last Man on Earth, who, what happened was they needed some sad music for this scene. And I said, well, what sort of sad music are you looking for? And they said, well, you know, the death march. And I said, you mean like da 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 da? And they said, yeah, that. And I said, oh, well, I have my accordion in my car. And they went, wait, you don't play the accordion? And I said, I do, and it's in my car. And they said, could you learn that? And I said, it'll be really rudimentary, but I'm pretty sure I can learn it. And so I did, and then I go into some weird made-up French cafe song at the end of it.
That's what I heard, that you wrote a song for the show or performed a song?
Oh, he sings a song at the very end to prove his love for someone.
Yeah.
And it's actually a song I wrote with Katie Herzig, and Katie's going to release the song because Will's version sounds. You'll see. It's very sweet and funny, but it's hard to sort of recognize it, but it's lovely. And he named the whole episode after this song, which is Screw the Moon.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And it's, so Katie, but I write music for Universal, so me writing music is something I do. I did it anonymously for years, and now I'm out of the closet.
Did you use a pen name, or?
I would use my mother's name, but let's be honest, it's not like I was having so much music published or anything that it needed. I wanted to earn the right. I didn't want to talk about it publicly because I wanted to earn the right to be in the room with the people I write music with, who are these amazing people in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm going there soon, and I go there, and Universal sets up my writing sessions, and we write music for artists in film and TV.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I have an audience question. Oh, really nice handwriting. From Amber Wagner, I think. Wanted to know, what advice would you give to an actress starting out at 40? P.S. You're the best.
Oh, thank you. Well, I started writing music at 54. So the first thing I would say to you is I don't believe in, limitations on dreams, and but I do believe in super hard work, and I think it's one of the things about starting music at 54 is that I was always the most inexperienced person in the room, and it's interesting to be that. So it's very humbling, and it's humbling to be a beginner again, and but as far as advice, I mean, I would just say, short of doing something that you'd be ashamed of or is against your, what your soul tells you not to, I would try to just be in anything you can be in. Find showcases, find school things, find class things, find any way to just work on your craft and work on. The more parts you play, the more it just leads to more work. It's just one of those things that makes no sense, like leaning away from the hill when you're skiing, but it's the way you're supposed to do it, and you just get yourself out there, and plays are, you know, especially focused on theater. I think it's so important in confidence. You know, most of the great directors I've worked with have said, you know, there's a big difference among actors when somebody's been able to stand on that stage and do that. It's really some chops that are good for us, for all of us. And it's scary, but it's true.
And what's up next for you? We have Orange, obviously, to look forward to in June, and then maybe 6 more TV shows.
I can talk about what I'm doing, can I, Jacob? Can I talk about what? Did you say yes?
I think he said yes.
Okay.
Even if he didn't, I would lie.
So Jim Henson's daughter Lisa found this material that she remembered that when she was young, her dad Jim Henson took her out and posed her with these creatures out in I think it was in Connecticut or someplace where they lived outside, and she found that script and those creatures, the original ones that he made, in the attic. And so we're doing a Thanksgiving special that is actually originated and designed by Jim Henson.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm really excited to do that. It's called Turkey Hollow, and I think my granddaughters are going to love it, and I think all ages are going to love it, because the older people will appreciate what a gift it is to have something from him, and then the kids will love these really fantastic creatures that he, you know, designed.
That's so cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank
we
you.
so appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you guys.